What do we do with this with this election that comes up in, I guess, 9 days from now? And let me just preface this by saying I want to be biblical. I'll give you some of my opinion this morning, and I hesitate to do that. I don't want what happens here on Sunday mornings to be my opinion. That does you no good, generally. What we need is God's Word. But I'll try to keep the two distinguished today, and you can take it or leave it. And if my prayer and humble hope is that it's helpful. I look in Proverbs 28, verse 15. God says to us, it says, like a roaring lion or a charging bear is a wicked man ruling over helpless people. Verse 16, a tyrannical ruler lacks judgment, but he who hates ill-gotten gain will enjoy a long life. And then down in verse 28, and I think we have this one on the screen. It says, but when the wicked rise to power, people go into hiding. But when the wicked perish, the righteous thrive. You see, there's a lot that Proverbs says about how things go depending upon the righteousness or wickedness, the character of those that are in leadership over us, those who rule over us. In a similar way, kind of tying Sermon 1 with Sermon 2, in a similar way to how influence happens in friendship relationships, influence happens always in the relationship between the ruler and the people. Influence happens with who is over us in a governmental leadership role. You've heard the phrase probably, elections have consequences. This is what it's saying. It matters who our leaders are. It does affect our lives. It affects the condition in which our children will grow up. It affects so many things. All right, go with me to Proverbs 29, one chapter over. I'll have a couple of these verses up on the screen. Look at verse 2. I'm trying to lay a foundation here. Verse 2 says, when the righteous thrive, the people rejoice. When the wicked rule, the people groan. You hear a lot of groaning going on even ahead of this one? Kind of feels like whoever we elect, right? We're going to be at this stage realizing Proverbs 29 too. Look down at verses 7 and 8 of Proverbs 29. The righteous care about justice for the poor, but the wicked have no such concern. Mockers stir up a city, but the wise turn away anger. So we want righteous and godly leaders by God's grace. Down in verse 16 of Proverbs 29. When the wicked thrive, so does sin. And this is, by God's grace, we need to pray for, and we need godly, righteous leaders. Because when unrighteous people are in control and calling the shots and setting the policy and affecting the environment in which we all live, sin flourishes. And you don't want to, and we don't, by God's grace, want to live in a place where sin becomes increasingly the norm. And he says, but the righteous will see their downfall. So I read those verses and I take away from this, number one, let me kind of try to be as helpful as I can. Number one, leaders with character matter. I've heard in seasons past, election cycles past, go for the person who, seems to have good success business-wise or leadership-wise. Character doesn't matter. They've been a total sinner and wicked person. That doesn't matter. It absolutely matters. In fact, I would argue it matters most. It matters most. And I know on the national level, it seems like, and again, it's hard because on the national level, you don't even know these people. We don't know either of the two remaining primary candidates that are left. We don't know them, but you can do as much research and try to find, difficult as it is, objective facts about them and learn as much as you can and read as much as you can, and it doesn't leave you with a lot of encouragement that either of these candidates have strong character. Not necessarily, what we're looking for, hopefully, is people defined by honesty, trustworthiness, wisdom, like we're talking about through this whole Proverbs study. People who are humble, that's what I mean by people of character. I think the good thing is, we need to not forget this, we sometimes think only in terms of national elections. Probably the best things we can do in this kind of an environment is get involved locally, because we can know people running for offices locally and find people of character to support and help set up in leadership roles over our communities, local, state. We can know people, and we can vote for people that we know have great character. Okay, so leaders with character matter, no matter how anybody else spins it. That's true. Number two, we want to try to vote as we want to think biblically. So our whole discipleship process here, as we study God's Word together, we want to think biblically about every aspect of our lives. So that would be true about how we vote as well. So we could call this one voting skills. All right, so let me try to give us a few points that I think are maybe most important in how to think biblically about how we vote, so that we could vote biblically. And let me just say, this is by no means comprehensive. There's a lot of issues worth our time and consideration. I just want to give a few, what I think are highest priority principles. How to think and vote biblically, I think, starts with this above everything else. It starts with Imago Dei. It starts with Imago Dei, the sanctity of human life. If we want to think biblically, this is where everything starts. Because think about this. According to Romans 13, God ultimately is the author of human governments. God sanctions them. God ordains them. Government is good in that sense. We need it. We need a government. It's basically organizing us. It's organizing human life in a hopefully orderly way. As Romans 13 says, by God's design to execute justice when people violate each other, when people are criminal towards each other, we need the government to step in and do its job. That's to punish those that are guilty. We need that. Provide order. That's the primary thing. But the whole purpose, the whole root of what's good about government, why it exists, why God ordains it, why we need it, why it's a positive thing, is completely because of its relationship to people. It is organizing people. It is to bless people. It is for the good of people. The heart of it is us. It's about people. People management. People organization. And you cannot have correct thoughts about government, correct votes for leaders in government without having a correct view of and understanding of people. This is where it all starts. And so the biblical understanding of people is that we are made in the image of God. This is the foundational understanding that everything else we derive out of it comes from. That God we know biblically, as He breathed into man the breath of life, He made us in His image. That's why the phrase sanctity of human life, there's something sacred, holy, divinely imprinted in every human being, period. There is infinite value and worth in every human being. And this is where our thinking biblically has to start. It's what's most important in all the list of other things, because out of it comes everything else. Let me see if I can explain a bit. So we need to seek out and find people who, as close as potentially possible, share that same view. And so people who pursue things that are going to help create a government, a culture of life instead of a culture of death. People who value life, period. Whether it's in the womb or whether it's on a sick bed at old age. Politicians who embrace positions that are pro-abortion. That is a step in the direction of a culture of death. We have got to vote for people who put at the core of their belief and policy positions the sanctity of human life. Euthanasia, other things that are becoming increasingly advocated in various circles. I think this is central. Because of Imago Dei, this is how we think and vote biblically. But out of Imago Dei, out of the sanctity of human life, there are corresponding applications of that come into play in every issue along the way. The first of those, I would say, out of the sanctity of human life, is human dignity. Human dignity. That there is a capacity, a capability in every human being. By God's design, there is a dignity in every human being, and that understanding affects a lot of positions in our policies. It is because of that root understanding and belief that we have a commitment to human freedom and liberty. You know, the great last, heroic call of William Wallace in Braveheart was that freedom! Why do movies about freedom, so stir us when somebody's giving their life for the cause of freedom? If correctly understood, it's not just so that we can all kind of run wild. It's not freedom. No, because this is the best environment in which it's the best application of our understanding of Imago Dei, that every human being has a dignity, and that dignity needs to be respected so that people aren't enslaved, people aren't controlled, people are left to their own devices. It's a reflection of what God did with Adam and Eve in the garden. You are free to go. You have autonomy, you have authority in you, and human beings do, and that needs to be respected. We need to look for leaders that understand that. And I think I give you three kind of next layer down applications of embracing a commitment to human dignity. The first is human freedom and liberty. And how does that apply? I think historically it's not hard to go back and look at the evidence. The more involved a government gets in the lives of its people, the less liberty and freedom they have and enjoy. The more involved the government gets, the more control the government has. The more control the government has, the less autonomy and freedom the people have. And I think the evidence of history shows as well, in environments where human dignity is honored and freedom is advocated, provided, fought for even, where that freedom is experienced, the culture itself thrives. People enjoy higher levels of quality of life. And so that comes out of human dignity, the human commitment to human freedom and liberty. The more, the bigger government gets, the more it exerts control, and that is a continuum in the direction of tyranny. And by definition, tyranny is a repression of human liberty and freedom. These things matter. So you go in and you look at candidates and you go, what's their view of government? Is it more involvement, more control over individuals? I think general principles, we want to go the other direction. But hand in hand with that concept, out of human dignity, it's not just that we apply that to understanding we respect human freedom and liberty, but it's also that we require human responsibility. That flows out of human dignity. The nobility and the capability of every human being as put in there by God means, as we've talked about before even in this series, about if a man doesn't work, he shouldn't eat. That we ought to vote for, as best we can when we have options to, people who have the same understanding. Because it does no good to undercut or not require people to live up to all that God has created them to be, where they are responsible. It's a part of human dignity to take responsibility for one's well-being. It's not the government's job to take responsibility for well-being. In fact, where the government does that, it's undercutting the dignity of that human being to their detriment, even though in an initial sense it might look like it's some form of compassion. I mean, the proof is in the pudding, right? I mean, the evidence is overwhelming. Lyndon Johnson stood up at his State of the Union speech in 1964 and declared a war on poverty in America. Since then, 22 trillion of our dollars have been leveraged through 50 different government agencies to try to eradicate, pull people out of, compassion people out of, gift people out of, provide people out of poverty. And do you know since then, the poverty level hasn't dropped at all. It's because the truth of the scriptures you can't kick against it and win. Because of how God created us. Human dignity demands human responsibility. And where you take that away from people, they don't rise to the level of dignity that's been put in them by their Creator. And so these policies undercut the very core of the Imago Dei. It's like tough love, right? If you're parenting your kids and you appreciate that, the worst thing you could do for them is to do everything for them, under the very misguided notion that somehow that's compassionate. You have just undercut the capacity in them that God put there. You've not treated them with dignity. But the third application of this understanding of human dignity that comes out of Imago Dei is justice and equality. That the government, we ought to vote for people over us who are committed to this equal opportunity. All men are created equal. We talk about our founding fathers. I think, here's my opinion time. I think the founding phrase that is quite largely responsible for all the great things, even with the challenges and the evil things along the way. But I think the founding phrase of our country comes out of the Declaration of Independence. That those guys, and remember that at the end of the Declaration, they said, we commit our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor to this truth. And many of them did die because of the commitment, but it started by saying, we hold these truths, not opinions, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, which in and of itself doomed the horrific evil of slavery. There's no way we could live with such contradiction. In fact, these are the words that Dr. King then even later used in his speech, I Have a Dream, when we still have to push against injustice, when we still have to create a place of true equality. But this founding phrase, all men are created equal and endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, among those life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. But this is the third of these applications of this commitment and understanding, this commitment to human dignity, understanding of Imago Dei, that we have got to have respect so that equal opportunities, this is the role of government. If there's injustice, to attack it, eradicate it. So we need to be committed to putting leaders in place who have that understanding. But again, it's equality of opportunity, not equality of outcome. That's an incredibly misguided goal. Okay. So we want to think and vote biblically. Let me put a couple other things, I think, as we look at who to vote for. Roles of leaders over us. I think security and peace, one of the God-given roles of government. We ought to take that to consideration as we think about a candidate. Which one might give us, or which ones on every level might give us the better policy, the better positions that create an environment of safety for our families, have a strong defense, have a strong sense of preserving and protecting. That's the right role of government. I think the fourth, as I'm kind of going down to me, a priority list would be, here's where the opportunity for prosperity comes in, where economic policies, economic understanding, and here's why I think it matters. Not so we can all get rich and do nothing. And I tell you, it's awesome to go down to places like the Dominican Republic and get perspective that brings. But here's why I hope our country makes decisions economically that make sense and give people who want to work hard an opportunity to earn a good bit. Is because I know people like you sitting in this place, and people all across our country. The latest statistic I saw said they believe between about 90,000 to 105,000 what we would call biblically committed evangelical churches in America. And they're full of people like you and me who understand God's generosity to us and get a great, huge blessing out of leveraging generosity for the good of the gospel and the good of people around the world. And I am humbled, and everybody on the recent trip, or if you've ever been on one, it is a humble privilege to be able to be the person who goes. Everybody we interacted with in the Dominican Republic this week, they cannot write support letters to their friends. They cannot get a group of friends together and come up with enough money to send them to the United States on a mission trip. They can't. It's not possible. Even if it were, there's other barriers that would keep them from being able to do it. American missions, American churches, American generosity is shining the light of the gospel, spreading the love of Christ all over the world. To me, that's why I hope we have the opportunity to remain economically prosperous, and government, in essence, gets out of the way of people who want to work hard and earn. Okay. The last of these, just guiding principle, in Matthew 11:19, Jesus says, wisdom is proved right by her actions. This is a hard one. But I think as we think about who to vote for, we live in such a crazy, mixed up world where the politicians have earned a living on being good with words and marketing themselves into certain positions, appealing, kind of dividing up the electorate into just special interest groups, and then trying to sell that they're going to do something for this group and do something for that group if you vote for me. And it's this word game that's just yuck. We've got to look at the actions and the fruit of the actions, the evidence of the actions, not listen just to the words. It's so easy to get fooled by the sweet speech. But Jesus said, wisdom is proved right by her actions. What has the person done in the past? What seems to, the proof is in the pudding. The evidence is there to be had. Not just what they say they want to do or think they want to do, wish they were do, that whole kind of a thing. Now listen, I totally understand, just speak specifically about Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton here. I understand many Christians saying, where we started this whole discussion was honorable, godly, righteous people. That's what we need. And voting for either one of these doesn't seem to be doing that. So I'm just not going to vote. Let me just say, I totally understand. And so I'm not going to try to talk you out of not holding that position. My opinion, my position will be, I think we ought to vote, or I'm going to vote. And I realize that I very well may be casting a vote for someone who's going to be the worst president in the history. It could be a disaster of, monumental proportions. It has that potential. But I do think I have when I go vote, I don't know if you guys feel this way. I wish you did. When I'm standing there in the line and then I cast that when I'm done, I sometimes literally do get chills up and down my arm. I'm getting them right now thinking about it. I can't believe people have died so I could go do that. It's a unique privilege in human history to get to go do that, and I don't want to ever not do that. And so I'm going to make the best decision I can. There's a lot at stake. People talk about Supreme Court nominations that will come out of the next president. That is a big deal, a very big deal in terms of setting the cultural world that our kids and grandkids will grow up in. So I'm going to vote for the one I think gives us the best chance to have Supreme Court justices that might lean a little bit more towards valuing life. I'm going to go that's what I'm going to vote for. I'm going to vote for the thing that makes me feel a little bit better about who I'm going to vote for is the vice presidential candidate that was chosen. This Mike Pence, I wish he was going to be the president. I feel good about voting for him. He's a godly man. He's the governor of Indiana. He's got a track record of the right kind of leadership. So out of the 4 people at the top of the ballots, I feel best about him. So that's the direction I'm going to go because of that. But you, under God's conscience leading in your life, forgive me if I've overstepped bounds and taken time I shouldn't have taken on that end, but if it's helpful, I wanted to offer that. So, all right. It's a mess, isn't it? We got to do the best we can, love each other, and spread the gospel, because that's the point. And that's why, I'll finish with this, I hope more than voting, you'll be here to pray together Monday through Friday. If you say, should we vote or pray? Pray. Praying's more important than voting. We'll start prayer week tomorrow morning at 6:15. I hope you'll take some time this week to be there. Let's pray right now.